how much do you think the all or nothing mindset feeds into this loop? Because, in the fitness industry, I see this all the time, and I'm sure you do as well, is people, they have a big weekend, out with friends, birthday parties, weddings, whatever, and then, come Monday, they're like in the gym, they're hammering themselves. By Wednesday, they're tired, they're burnt out, they haven't been able to manage their stress very well. And it's like, well, I'm not going to train today, and then I'm not going to focus on what I'm eating. I'm not going to stay hydrated. I'm not going to go to bed at the same time. And it's this all or nothing mindset, right? Like, I think that all or nothing mindset sabotages people all the time. And it's like, well, if I didn't stick to my diet today, or I gave into an urge, then today's fucked. I may as well just like write it off, do whatever I want, and then start again tomorrow. And I think that mindset sabotages people all the time. And in my mind, I always say to my clients, I'm like, the next decision you make is the most important one. Like, don't fall down that rabbit hole just because you've fallen off the wagon, so to speak. Like, you've got another opportunity with your next decision to get yourself moving in the right direction, because, those habits can either build in a positive manner or build in a negative manner. And once you realize that, then, if you have one poor decision or less than optimal decision, then it's much easier to make the next one and the next one and the next one. But once you're aware of that, you can stop that spiral, put the handbrake on, and then start moving in the right direction again.
Yeah, that is so spot on. And part of binge eating is a binge restrict cycle. So it's a similar concept of like all or nothing. It's like, okay, this week, there might be I'm just going to go with Instagram here. New Instagram influencer putting out a 6-week program of shredding. Similar concept. Let's go hard for 6 weeks, all out. And then what happens in the 7th week? You blow out, you feel like crap, and then it's like, okay, well, I'll just start again. So this next phase of the components, this feeds into it perfectly, because it's the psychoeducation of habit loops, right? So understanding how the binge eating happens and how it can increase with different cues. So, for example, dieting in itself is a cue. Reading those things on social media can be a cue. And as I said, cues aren't always emotional. They can be locational, like airports, grandparents' houses. They can be physiological, so like the time of day, like before bed or Friday night. They can be sensory, from dreams, from sense, from memory, etc. So the concept of all or nothing in itself is a habit loop, right? So, we've got, and I know you do as well, but there's a huge variety of tools that clients can trial and error over time to help improve their habits. But I think the ones that will be most beneficial to listeners today is to gain an understanding of pattern interrupts and habit stacking. So when we're looking at a pattern interrupt with binge eating disorder, basically you're breaking an individual's thoughts, habits, behaviours to literally shake up the neurological pathway that we've created. So when we look at pattern interrupts, we need to acknowledge what the actual cue is. So you need to know what it is, right? So that might be, hey, I know it's every Friday night, whatever. That way we know when we can try and break up the routine and basically how to avoid that behaviour of overeating. So last week I used the example, I think, of breaking up with a partner or having a fight with a partner. It's actually very common to become what we call emotional eating. So emotional eating is essentially a very typical habit that can form in our teenage years, having a fight with a family member or a partner, and then kind of resorting to food just to feel comfort, right? As that happens, we create that neurological link that we spoke about last week. We're going A to B. It might strengthen over time as different emotions come up and it gets stronger and stronger.
Trampling that grass or building
Trampling the grass, exactly.
Yep.
So breaking patterns is really hard, but if we use an interruption, one that is very different to what we are used to, as soon as the cue presents itself, we can literally break down the routine. So let's say, for example, you're feeling sad, and this happens, once or twice a week. You feel sad, you get up, you go to the fridge, and then you eat something, you go sit back down, and then you come back up to the fridge, and it becomes a constant overeating process within that 2-hour period. This is a very common binge eating disorder scenario. So getting up, sitting down, getting up, sitting down, etc. If you are aware of this, you know that this happens every time that you're feeling sad. What we can do is look at breaking up the cue, okay? So what can we do as the person walks into the kitchen or towards the fridge that will literally confuse the brain? Okay, now some of the things that we do are wild, particularly if you live by yourself, you can do whatever you want. Dropping down and doing push-ups. Hey?
A shock collar?
Shock collar. Yeah, bang, damn, that's a good one. Dropping down, doing push-ups, singing, dancing, yelling a word out loud, and if you're like me, doing burpees. Burpees were part of my therapy for 2 years, and I can't explain how much confusion there was in my life. I just got up and started doing burpees in the living room. But I'm glad I lived by myself at that point. Again, let's be contextual here. I was living by myself, so no one saw what was going on. But this method was really effective because I was breaking the neurological pattern. It was so different from me getting up from going from the couch to the fridge. I was getting up, doing a burpee, and then being like, what the fuck? And then sitting back down. So, it sounds quite simple, but it really can confuse you, and it does break up that pattern. So it's this concept of trying to find something that's so different and so out of routine, that'll help kind of rewind the loop that you've created. So another good example, and this is again is
well, it's just I like to think about it like a circuit, right? Like, if with electricity you create a circuit and it fires off the light bulb. So it's the same thing here. Like if you can break that circuit somewhere along that line, then you get a different result, right?
Yep, exactly. And this next one is again a very, very common one that we find with clients is that I'm going to use alcohol as an example. So say on Fridays you come home after work, you pour yourself a drink to relax, you sit in your spot on the couch, and you find that 2 glasses turns into 4. Okay, it becomes a habit. It's coming every Friday, but you're sick of it. You're sick of waking up feeling like crap on a Saturday. Now, what we can do here is look at the routine and also look at the cue. So the cue is the Friday. The cue is actually the day of the week. But you know that it happens when you get home, and you know that it happens when you sit on the couch. So a very easy pattern interrupt here could be as simple as physically moving yourself from one spot on the couch to another. So placing a blanket, some pillows, a book in the usual spot on the couch on the Friday morning before you leave work, bam, pattern interrupt. Physically and visually interrupting your usual pattern means that you're creating a different routine when you get home in the evening. It could mean another pattern interrupt could be driving home a different way. Okay, you're interrupting the normal pattern. So when you get home from work, you pour yourself your wine, or you're sitting in a completely different spot in the house, you've broken up that circuit that you were just talking about because you're doing something completely different. Very, very simple tool, and it's one, this is why I wanted to kind of give this one today, because it's one that all you need to do is look at the day itself and be like, this is what typically happens in order, and then at the end of the day, this is what happens. So let's try and add in things throughout the day to try and interrupt. Putting your keys in a different spot can make a difference. Like really, really small things can change that circuit.
What about like changing your, like moving the furniture around in the house? Could that
100%.
have the same effect? Yeah.
Yep. Moving the beanbag from one spot to another where you usually sit on it. Having someone else sit in your normal spot will make a difference. At the dinner table, same thing. Switch seats. If you find that you're overeating at dinner, sit in a different spot. So pattern interrupts, very effective method to stop overeating and binge eating in particular, because you're using different tools here to just break up that pattern.
Cool. What have we got next?
Habit stacking. So we're still looking at the concept of habit loops and the importance of it, but looking now at habit stacking over a long term. For those that don't know this concept, I know you've done a podcast on this, but essentially is building momentum from one small habit to another so it eventually becomes automatic. Now, in the simplest of terms, it's like sticking a new habit to an old one. So for example, let's say you've had surgery and you have to do scar management with moisturizer every night. In order to remember, the easiest thing to do would be to stick the moisturizer next to something you already do every night, like next to the toothbrush or toothpaste, because that's going to mean you're implementing it with ease. You're not really thinking about it. Boom. happens. You're sticking it next to something. When we look at habit stacking over the long term, we can see the benefit it has to people's progress around thoughts and behaviours, both negatively and positively. So an example here, I think, negatively of is the use of phones. So if we look at when we had phones 15 years ago and we were using 3310 Nokias, how little we were using it then, to over the years getting fancier and fancier phones, to how much we rely on it and use it now. Okay, so that's actually a process of habit stacking. So on that topic, going back to phones, we can look at the use of reducing phone times, the positive side of things that have helped reduce self-sabotaging behaviours for myself and for my clients, both with binge eating disorder and in particular body dysmorphic disorder. So while I said before, putting the moisturizer next to something, that's a small, easy daily habit stack. When we're looking again at the process of recovery, things take time. So over 7 years, I've reduced my social media usage down to like under 10 minutes a day. Because what I would find is social media would create algorithms that tempted me with food. Same with my clients. You look at one thing that's delicious and then it just keeps coming up. You're constantly like bombarded with cookies and cupcakes, and when you're trying
social media is an echo chamber.
Yeah, when you're trying to beat that urge and you're constantly seeing cookies, guess what? You're going to want to act on it. So that, in conjunction with things like physique competitors, bodybuilders, CrossFitters constantly being on my feed and on my clients' feeds, that concept of that athletic figure that might not be, achievable for those of us that aren't athletes on a daily basis anymore, really, really hard to deal with. So that negative feeling for me fed into my binge eating disorder. So what I would do is I would wear large shirts because I felt crap about myself, and then I would overeat because I was like, no one can see me anyway because I'm wearing big moo-moos, and then I'd constantly talk myself down. So I had two things happening. I had my body dysmorphic disorder going off, being like, you look like shit because you don't look like those athletes. And then I had myself being like, well, just wear big shirts and overeat because no one sees you anyway. So here, like I said, I'm unraveling two concepts of these psychoeducational components. So what I did to habit stack was, over the years, go through a process. So in 2015, for example, I went off Facebook. I went off for the year. I've never been back on it. So that habit stuck. In 2016, I decided, okay, no screen time for the first 20 minutes of every day. I don't want to influx, myself with influences and stuff. That stuck. So in 2017, I was like, okay, no screen time for the last 30 minutes of the day. That has stuck. 2018, I started doing digital detoxes every 2 weeks. That stuck. 2019, I was like, all right, let's remove all my, in brackets, friends and influences from my feed. Just delete them. That stuck. 2020, it made my life much easier to just go off my personal Instagram. I was like, forget it. I don't need it anymore. Go to business page. That's it. So now, 2021, I've only got the business page and I can just time limit under 10 minutes because A, I follow 3 things, which is the news and the New York bucket list, and nothing comes up in my feed. I have nothing to look at. So I just post what I need to post. Let's see you later.
Yep. So everything you're doing has an intent.
100%.
I think that's important. Yeah, I think that's important because, for the listeners, you didn't just go, I'm going to do all of this shit at once.
Exactly.
This is what I love about the fitness industry, right? Like, there's so many fucking principles that carry over to everything else in life. And that is like goal setting. That is having intent with what you're doing. That is progressive overload, right? You're looking at frequency, intensity, like time when you're doing things and all that type of stuff. There's so many principles that carry over, and that progressive overload is super important. Whenever you want to change anything, first you need to be aware, then you need to know exactly where you are, then set goals, set a direction that you want to be moving in, and then go, what's one thing that I can do that's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? And that first thing you did was like, went off Facebook.
Yeah.
And then you, as you said, that stuck. All right, cool. What's the next thing? Boom. Don't use my phone for the first 20 minutes a day. All right, cool. If I can do that consistently, what's the next thing that I can do? What's the next thing that I can do? What's the next? And it's been a 6-year process for you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I say to people, like, you know, people are like, your clients have been with you so long, and I'm like, because this is a process. This isn't a quick fix. So again, another example of habit stacking with a client who I've got who she's recovered now, had body dysmorphic disorder. In 2016, she was weighing herself every day, and more than once a day. So she was getting on the scale, she was getting upset, etc. So what we had to go through was this process of habit stacking. So for 2016, what we did was like, okay, I'm going to let you get on the scale. It's going to be once a day and once a day only. Keep accountable to me, and that's what she did. That stuck. By 2017, I was able to reduce it a little bit. Let's make it 5 times a week. Keep accountable to me.
Yeah, let's just pause there for a second as well. Sorry to cut you off, but I think this is important to note as well. Is, you know, I've done the same thing with some of my clients, and the educational component is so important there, because when you can explain to people, hey, if you're going to jump on the scales, do it at the same time every day. Do it first thing in the morning when you get out of bed, because if you test first thing in the morning and then you test, you know, a couple of hours later before you train, then you check again a couple of hours later, and a couple of hours later after, you know, meals and things like that, like there's going to be fluctuations throughout the day. And if you know, don't understand that carbohydrate intake, glycogen storage, sodium intake, you know, stress and training and hydration levels and nutrition, all that type of stuff,
Menstrual cycle.
all of that stuff affects like your gravitational pull, which is your weight, right? It doesn't, that weight, that number on the scale doesn't tell you what that composition is, like where is that weight coming from?
Yeah.
And there's so many factors that are involved in that. So